Well, thank you, everybody. I am honored to be here today. I'm super excited. We're going to nerd out a little bit. This is a topic that might seem a little nerdy at first, but it's really near and dear to my heart, and it's really cool. The only thing I won't be able to do is do a demo today, and I'll talk a little bit about that and what happens next. But today we're going to talk about something called organizational network analysis. And we're going to talk about that because I firmly believe that it definitely can supercharge any change and transformation effort that you're engaged with. And so the reason that I believe that so fervently is because organizational change management, organizational network analysis is about codifying and understanding using data human relationships and human behaviors within systems such as workplaces, and unlocking some of those core insights by doing that. So let me see if I can move this forward. So just a little bit about me. We're not going to spend any time here, but I'm Hervé. I have a lot of experience in a lot of different disciplines. I'm just one of those liberal arts type people that like to do a lot of things. When somebody asks me what I specialize in, I always tell them I specialize in being a Swiss Army knife. This is how it is. So you either like me for that or you don't, but that's just how it is. Current recent roles, I've been advising a company that's a leader in the O&A space. A funny story about that. While I was looking for work, I was also getting certified. And so I found out that there was a thing called O&A, which was the name for something that I've been doing for many years manually. And so once I found the tool, I took the training and got certified. Once I got certified, I called up the CEO and I said I wanted to work for him, and he gave me a job as a consultant and an ambassador. So that's how I became involved with the company that we'll talk a little bit about today. So I do some consulting for them. I'm also an ambassador, a brand ambassador for the work. I also am a founding member of this esteemed community, which I love. And I met Tina and company and Jen through working at UKG, Jim as well, Renee, so on and so forth. I was UKG's only change management fellow for many years. Before that, I ran the change management function for a consulting organization that was acquired by CGI. And prior to that, I did large operational and other sorts of technology changes for Bank of America. I worked at McKinsey, Marsh & McLennan, AIG, all the usual suspects. We're not going to do this poll because when I did this presentation originally, there was an article that went with it, which I also shared with this community early around how people are using data to drive change management and transformation work. So maybe we'll do that at a later time. So organizational network analysis. These are just standard definitions. So Deloitte refers to it as a structured way to visualize how comms, information, and decisions flow through organizations. General Motors, right? It's a lens to evaluate how people show up. And Rob Cross, who is a famous O&A practitioner, thought leader, a very, very huge presence in this space, talks about O&A as being an X-ray vision into the inner workings of an organization. So really making the invisible patterns of interaction, flow, collaboration, influence, to make it visible and therefore actionable. And if you know anything about change and transformation, you know that it's really about getting people to move to where we need them to be, sustaining that movement, and sustaining and creating additional business benefit. And I always like to say that change management is not about the end, it's about the beginning, because often you're changing to get to a new plateau from which you can grow. And so getting people from A to B is really about the start of something new, not the end of a journey, but the beginning of a new journey. That's how I think about change management in any respect. When you think about O&A providing an X-ray into the inner workings of an organization, there's nothing like an org chart. And if anybody knows me, you know, the first thing I do is I want to do an org chart. I did one today for my current employer so that I can really understand the structure of an organization, who works for who, how it's organized in terms of the bodies of work and the centers of power, and where the organization tends to have ballast or not. But O&A allows you to take that formal view of how an organization is structured managerially, and it lets you start to overlay how people really make decisions in organizations by observing how they work, seeing how they do, thinking about who they turn to, what are they doing during their day, how busy are they, all these little demographic attributes about a person's life at work can really inform what's really happening. And you're all familiar with that famous change management photo or picture or whatever. It's a glacier. The top is what you see, and what's really underneath is what can make you sink or what can make you succeed. And so to me, O&A is really cool because it's all about social capital. And today we live in a world defined by social capital. What is Twitter? What is Facebook? What are all these social networking tools? It's social capital. So really, really important. O&A breaks down into, there are two types of O&A. And O&A has been around for a long time. So if you happen to be an HR person, which I'm not, or steeped in HR stuff, which I'm not, you will have heard about O&A, but it's really having a resurgence as companies move from, this waterfall-driven, hierarchically managed organization to value stream and agile organizations. This concept, these analytics are becoming really, really important. And so O&A falls into two categories. There's active and there's passive. So active is really what we would normally do, right? We would go out and we would do an employee survey. We'd go talk to people. We'd make notes. We'd do interviews. We do spot checks. See if they're smiling or not at work. We'd ask managers, "Are you talking to your teams?" And they'd say, "Of course, we're talking to our teams." And then we accept that as fact. We'd ask people, "Do you like?" Do you understand what your manager is asking you? Do you do? Oh, yes, we know exactly what we're supposed to do. And meanwhile, in the locker room or in the water cooler, they're telling themselves, "We have no idea what you're talking about. It makes no sense." So we would sort of just gather all this information, but O&A helps us really break through in new ways. Passive O&A is really, instead of asking people, let's just observe them. Let's just see how they're, what they're really doing, right? Let's look at a meta level. Let's look at their interactions. Let's see what they're doing. Let's see what they're talking about. If they need help, who do they really go to? When there's a big announcement, where is the buzz happening? Are people that we have trusted with being the sponsors of change and transformation really doing what they need to do? They said they were doing it, but are they really doing it, right? So it's really our way of understanding how organizations really function based on who interacts with whom, how, and about what. So again, in the traditional analytic framework of a change process, you have four major categories of activity, generically speaking, right? Put the models aside. You've got an assessment phase, a planning phase, implementation, and sustain. Assess, right? Before something is going to happen. Where are people today? What's happening? Do we have feedback? What kind of feedback? Do we know how they're performing in terms of their day-to-day work? Do we have anything going on in the marketplace that we need to factor in? What are customers saying about our current state, right? And internal audits and assessments, right? Typical stuff. Planning, again, stakeholder analysis, right? Who are the people that need to be engaged? Who are the people that are going to drive the change and support the change, both formally and informally as agents, ambassadors, sponsors, leaders, etc. Do our traditional change impact analysis, right? Which audiences are impacted and how and to what degree. I happen to love a good change impact assessment. I love that. Resource availability, right? Are people overtaxed, overworked? Are they working around the clock? Are they, what's going on, right? Are we going to be asking for blood from a stone? Risk assessment, right? What if we do? What if we don't? All the various types of risk: market risk, operational risk, technology risk, reputational risk, all those. There's like about 9 of them. There's probably 12 really. Change readiness assessment: is the organization ready to go through a change? And current state analysis. Then implementation. your traditional project management work, communications plans, training, development, adoption metrics, change metrics, feedback, and then this all important sustainment phase, which a lot of times we forget about, right? So post-implementation reviews, performance monitoring, feedback, all of that good stuff. Well, in the new world of O&A, there are all of these really cool, fascinating, emerging analytics that can really break us free. I like to think about, and I put this on LinkedIn the other day in one of my writings. If you remember the the Mac commercial, where that runner with the giant hammer is running. There's a presentation and all these people are sitting and it's all gray and they're just watching this man talk at you and make up nonsense. And there's a woman running in from the back of the stadium and she has a giant hammer and she runs up to the screen and she hits the screen with the hammer and it shatters and the Mac appears and then everything becomes colorful. I'll share that with the community. Anyway, it's a famous commercial. And I like to think that O&A really is that breakthrough in terms of emerging analytics. So in the assessment phase with O&A, you can do some really cool things that you can't do otherwise, such as network mapping. So you can actually look at the organization and see who is interacting with who, when, how frequently, and so on and so forth. Who are the key influencers, right? So where are the folks where everyone is coalescing? Who are the folks that are isolated, right? You can also look at centrality metrics. So centrality is sort of more about where is all the action, right? I've got 5 places I can go, but where's everybody really hanging out, right? So that's an important metric for a variety of reasons. On the planning side, collaboration and communication patterns. You're implementing a value stream. Well, are people actually operating the way a value stream requires that you operate, which is really across the functions, horizontally? You can see dynamics, right, between teams. You can do pattern analysis, heat maps. You can do scenarios. Hey, what if we take this group and split it in 2? What happens? Right? Not just operationally or from a technology perspective, but what happens to the dynamics? What happens to the knowledge that might be required of a team that you're extracting from a team? What does that do? And so you can actually run those scenarios. Hey, what happens if I acquire a new company and I bring in all these people with new roles? What does that do to how things flow? So you can do all that kind of scenario planning. And of course, with the implementation, you can just sort of look and see that things are actually moving in the way that you think they should be moving. And of course, in the sustainment phase, you can actually prove whether or not your theories about how the organization is going to function are actually happening. And all of this through data, through active and passive. And the use cases here are incredible. It's not just change management. You can do diversity inclusion. You can do mergers and acquisition related work, leadership development, new hire onboarding, employee well-being, talent retention, return to office, org development. Any attribute of a person or a person's experience within the organization can be added to the model. And you can then use that information to do the analytics to really answer questions or solve problems in a way that you couldn't do it before. And again, this is all a metadata level. You're not really looking at the content of the exchanges. You're looking at the patterns of the exchanges, right? So we want to make sure we're GDPR compliant. This is a screenshot from the tool that I am an ambassador for because it's the only one in the market that has an AI capability, but this is not a sales pitch. This is what I know. And so this is their active O&A panel where you can actually see, imagine if you could move all of those people around and click on them and inspect the nature of the dynamics. And imagine if you could look at the right and look at every single person in your universe and get more information about who they are and how their information and their being moves through the enterprise. Similarly, with passive O&A, same sort of metrics, although passive is more focused on the influence side of the house. So it's less about the org structure, but it's more about people say they're doing one thing, but they're really doing something else. What is that something else? And then of course, there's all of the standard reports and heat maps and so on and so forth, so you can really dig in there and play with your data. So it's a very, very powerful tool. And one of the things that I will say is I can't do a demo today, unfortunately. However, if anybody's interested in learning more, I'm more than happy to set up time separately to do that. And I may soon be able to provide folks who want something more of on a self-service basis, low commitment, you don't even want to talk to me. I might soon be able to give you a link with a code that you can actually sign up and load some data and use the tool. So those are things that are emerging from this startup that I'll be able to share with folks once those things are announced. So having said that, I'm going to stop. I know I talked a lot. I know it sounds a little esoteric in some ways, and so does change management for that matter. But I'm happy to answer questions or entertain ideas. Or anyway, that's the end of my presentation.
Hervé, Carrie was saying that in the chat that she did an O&A to make the business case to invest in a collaboration tool. Carrie, you want to? I'd be interested in hearing a little bit about how you used O&A to make the business case.
Sure. And Hervé and I talked a little bit about this too, but it's been a minute.
Yeah.
So I had a group come to me and say that they didn't feel like they were. So I worked for a global chemical manufacturing organization, 19 manufacturing sites across the globe, and we struggled with knowledge sharing and knowledge capture. And there was one particular group who came to me in the org development team to find out what they could do to collaborate better, share more information. And this is an organization where there were a lot of PhD chemists who didn't want to share knowledge, because if I'm working on something where I'm going to get a patent or I'm going to get credit for something, I'm like, I don't want to share it. So knowledge hoarding was a real problem, and they wanted to be more open and more collaborative around the globe. So again, because I was working with PhD chemists, I knew that I was going to need data to back up any recommendation that I made. And so we engaged in an O&A to, or what I learned it as was a social network analysis. They changed it because that felt too social networky, and serious organizations don't like talking about social networks. So I engaged in this so that I could show them clear data around who really held the knowledge in the organization. So it's that saying, like, this is not about who knows what, it's about who knows what, right? It's like, so who knows to go to Hervé for whatever the thing is that Hervé knows best. Gotcha. Because if nobody knows he knows anything about O&A, who cares, right? So it's not about what he knows, it's about who knows what he knows. And I could demonstrate through the data, through charts and graphs visually, who had all the knowledge, or who had the key to the knowledge, right? So for example, there was a resource who was the go-to person in the United States for our whole China plant. Like almost everyone connected with this one person for almost everything. And that's great if he really has all the knowledge to share and he has the time and the capability to do that. But if he's not the person who you want to be the spokesperson to our entire China operations, we got to figure something different out, right? Why don't they know who else to go to for other things? Why don't they have ways, whether it's processes or a tool or for a forum, to go to somebody else for knowledge? Or is this the only guy willing to really share everything so openly, right? So it doesn't answer all the questions, but it gives you the questions to ask, right? About then how to open up that collaboration. So it was enough data to show them that they had that they needed to create processes and needed a tool and needed a forum for people to be able to come together and share knowledge.
I love that. That's so great. I mean, and that's what these things are. They're tools, right? And it's great that you had the ability and the knowledge to connect with somebody who could really help you bring that tool to bear to solve a problem and have business impact, right? Which is what it's all about.
That's right.
I mean, I think one thing that I'll mention is O&A. One of the reasons that I think a lot of people don't know about it, don't have access to it, is because O&A tends to live in HR. And HR is not often seen as a strategic partner in that sense, right? But HR has a lot of data that that really helps understand humans at work. And if we're going to be leading change that involves humans, you know, moving with that change and adopting that change, right, then you need that data to be successful. And what's really cool about O&A and other related data sets like process mining data that I know Renee is fond of, this data provides some unparalleled insights that can really make our jobs as change and transformation professionals easier. I think that our profession is, I don't want to say under automated, but I do think that it has not made enough of an investment in the data that is available to us.
So, Hervé, when you're talking about data and HR having a lot of it, does the data come from just like the HR systems? And also you showed a diagram of an org chart, more formal, and then you showed an informal, right? That was based on other things. How do you get to that informal? How do you get to that? Like, how would I know, even from the HR systems that I'm familiar with, right? Even at UKG, right? Going to those systems wouldn't tell me that you have O&A as a skill set, or that you are the person that I should go to talk about O&A.
That's correct. I think a couple of things. One is every major system that any company is using today, even the smallest systems, honestly, are generating event logs. They're generating a trail of activity in these logs. And it's fairly easy to ingest and inspect those logs. So if you want to know how your salespeople are performing and you know that they've got to use 5 different tools to do their jobs, as an example, you can collect the logs from across each of those 5 systems, attach them to the people records, and start doing analytics around it. It's just a matter of knowing what data is available, having the resources and connections to bring that data together, having a strategy for determining what questions you want to answer and what data is needed, and then being in a position to act on what you're learning. Now, having said that, there are tools like Microsoft. I don't know if folks are familiar with Viva, Microsoft Viva, which is their platform, and it does a lot of the stuff, right? But for Viva to work, you have to be living in Viva. So you have to be using its social network. You have to be using 365. You have to be using all their tools on the front end and on the back end, which some companies don't want to do that. And also Viva doesn't necessarily capture things that aren't within its universe. Google has tools, right? What's cool about the product I showed earlier is that it's really focused specifically on the behavioral nature. So it doesn't try to boil the ocean. It's really solving the behavioral networking problem. And as such, it connects to all these other tools and will bring you the data that you need. So you don't have to think about it. But like any technology, you have to know what problem you're trying to solve. And increasingly, you need experts from every domain in your company, plus HR, right? Because it's people data. You need HR, people data, to bring it all together. So I always say, if you're interested in exploring this, Think about a problem you want to solve. Think about some questions you want to answer. Start small, bring together a small group of people that represent each area, that understand the technology your people are using, and also understand the survey processes or the feedback, however it is that you gather feedback, which is typically technology driven at this point, right? And throw it all together and see what emerges.
Tina, I didn't have any of that data. I did a survey. So I just asked questions about what are the sources of getting answers to different questions. And sometimes it was a tool, or it was a platform, or it was a person. And so
Okay.
I just asked the questions.
And that's one of the things I wasn't able to show this, but in this ONA tool that I am an ambassador for, one of the active components is a survey. And the questions it asks are, for example, who do you go to if you need advice about something?
I did. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. But any survey, right? You do the annual employee survey, right? Imagine if you could take that employee survey and mash it up with some other data. A lot of times those employee surveys are inaccessible to us, right? You only get what they want you to get.
Yeah. I actually talked to somebody that I'd worked with in the past who'd branched out into some other consulting work that early on, before all of us got on the AI bandwagon, they were thinking about putting together a tool where AI could basically read your employees' expressions as you were coming in the door, or as they were sitting on project teams, as an indicator of whether you had the right people on the project teams. Or
that would not be good for me.
Me either.
I cannot control my face.
But think about how close we actually are to that, right? I've got a cross-functional transformation team, and we've talked on this on our community before about how part of the secret sauce is not only do you have the right skill sets, it's do you have a group of people that are all really truly aligned with each other and interested in each other being successful for the transformation? Can they work things out? Can they do, etc.? And now you could potentially be we talk about reading body language, but now you could be potentially grabbing indicators off of videos and off of teams and that type of thing to tell, are they engaged? Are they, what is their sentiment? That type of thing. You're going to be able to get that off of video pretty soon.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I don't know if I can say this. Some of us know of some former companies who have implemented technologies along the following lines. Let's monitor what people are doing at their desks.
Yep.
Throughout the day. Oh, let's monitor badging in and out of offices. Okay, that's fairly standard, right? Oh,
yeah, I was gonna say that's pretty standard.
Let's monitor where people are sitting, how often they're sitting, their presence, their physical presence within physical spaces. So, I mean, and the question is, what do you do with all that? And how to use it responsibly, right? Because it's kind of here already.